We begin this morning with reports that the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, was given access to some of the country's most sensitive secrets. But only a year after the president overruled his chief of staff, his White House counsel, and his own intelligence experts. I have a great team here to break all of it down. But first, I want to explain exactly what's going on. There will be some people out there that are outraged about this story just because we're talking about the president and his son-in-law who's in the White House. But here's the thing. This story is not about nepotism. It is about national security. That is why we all should care. This morning, the New York Times reporting that President Trump personally ordered that Jared Kushner be given top security clearance in May of 2018, overriding the concerns of then Chief of Staff John Kelly, then White House counsel Don McGahn, and intelligence officials who had red-flagged Kushner's application. In fact, the Times reports that both McGahn and Kelly were so troubled by Trump's decision that they wrote internal memos about this very incident. It was NBC that reported that Kushner's application for top-secret clearance was initially rejected by the White House security specialists after an FBI background check raised questions about Kushner's family business, his foreign contacts, his foreign travel, and meetings he personally had during the campaign. NBC reported that the specialists were overruled by their supervisor. But the Times says the decision came from President Trump himself. It says, quote, in May 2018, the White House counsel's office, which at the time was led by Mr. McGahn, recommended to Mr. Trump that Mr. Kushner not be given clearance at the top secret level. But the next day, Mr. Trump ordered Mr. Kelly to grant it to Mr. Kushner anyway. The Washington Post says the president gave the order, quote, after Kushner and his wife Ivanka pressured the president to grant Kushner the long-delayed clearance. If all of this is true, it means a couple of things. First, it means that Jared Kushner now has access to the country's most heavily guarded secrets, despite officials at the highest levels of the White House and the intelligence community saying he should not. It also raises new questions for Deputy White House Press Secretary Hogan Gidley, who told the Post that the White House treats all security clearances individually, neutrally, and equally. New questions for Kushner's attorney, Abby Lowell, who said his client's application, quote, underwent the normal process. New question for Lowell's spokesperson, who said it was handled with no pressure from anyone. And it means new questions for Ivanka Trump, who was asked about this on ABC just 3 weeks ago.
The president had no involvement pertaining to my clearance or my husband's clearance. Zero.
What were the problems early on?
There weren't any.
So no special treatment?
No.
And it means new questions for the president himself, who told the New York Times he had nothing to do with any of this. Listen.
Do you tell General Kelly or anyone else in the White House to overrule security officials, the career?
No, I don't think I have the authority to do that. I'm not sure I do, but I wouldn't do it. Jared's a good. I was never involved with the security.
I want to bring in New York Times White House correspondent Annie Carney, who co-wrote today's article. Annie, this is some extraordinary reporting. Help us understand this. The president, he has the authority to give this kind of order. So why wouldn't he just admit it?
That's the biggest takeaway here. That's the biggest question. No one is doubting that he has the authority to give a top secret security clearance to whatever aide he wants to. So why didn't he just say, Jared Kushner is my guy. This is who I want dealing as my top aide in the White House. He needs clearance. End of story. Instead, they have lied about it at every single level, and the question is why? Why were they covering it up? That's one big takeaway. The other one thing that we need to remember right now while we review this story in the current moment is that Jared Kushner is the de facto chief of staff. Mick Mulvaney is the first chief of staff in there who has not challenged the seniority of Jared and Ivanka, has realized that that's the way this place works, and nothing's going to change that. Jared Kushner just met with Mohammed bin Salman earlier this week abroad. He is in the middle of working on his long-awaited Middle East peace plan. So this is a high-stakes moment for Jared Kushner to have to be answering these questions about why they all tried to pretend it was a normal process when it definitely was not.
And why did so many officials not want Jared to get this clearance?
That is unclear. There have been questions raised about his clearance from day one. On his original form, he left out key meetings he had with foreign officials and with some Russians, and then he later had to amend that form and said it was just a clerical error, no harm, no foul. There have been questions raised from the beginning about the meetings that he's had and connections with his family's business and foreign governments, but we don't know exactly what the FBI and the CIA, what their hesitations were about granting this clearance to him, but we know that they raised them and that there was some concern about granting him this top secret TS-SCI clearance.
Annie, thank you so much. This is some piece. If you haven't read it yet, please check out the New York Times. It's a must read. I want to bring in NBC's Geoff Bennett, who, of course, is at the White House. Jeff, what exactly is the White House saying about this, specifically Ivanka Trump's office?
Hey, Steph. Well, the White House isn't saying much beyond this single-sentence statement. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders tells NBC News, "We don't comment on security clearances." Well,
Except, of course, Ivanka did when she was asked 3 weeks ago by ABC. And I believe the answer was, of course not.
You're right about that. Look, and absent any sort of, substantive comment from the White House about all of this, we can put this Kushner revelation into the broader context of how President Trump handles, or some might say mishandles, national security information. We know he's used an unsecure cell phone. We know he's talked about highly classified information in front of guests at his private Mar-a-Lago estate. We know he's disclosed national security information to the Russians, the Russian foreign minister, the Russian ambassador, while he was in the Oval Office. And we also know that he's revoked the security clearances of his political opponents. And so now you can add to that the president stepping in, advocating for his son-in-law and senior advisor to get him access to top secret information over the objections of not just intelligence officials, but his top 2 White House officials at the time. So this is serious stuff. This is a serious scandal. And already you have House Democrats, to include Adam Schiff, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, vowing to investigate. Look, this is another one of the perils of running the government as if it's a family business, Steph.
My goodness. All right, I want to bring my team in here. Ken Dilanian, who covers intelligence and national security for NBC News. Rick Tyler, a Republican strategist and co-founder of Foundry Strategies. Jason Johnson, politics editor at TheRoot.com. Josh Gottheimer, a Democratic congressman from my home state of New Jersey, which means, sorry, guys, Josh is getting all of the time this morning. And Malcolm Nance, executive editor of the Terror Asymmetrics Project. Ken, I got to go to you. You wrote that NBC News article in January that said Kushner's article got dinged out of the gate. Excuse me, his application got dinged out of the gate. Walk us through why it was rejected and really the path over the last year, because I remember when he did get security clearance. I remember sitting in this chair and saying, people need to dial it back. If you're so concerned that Jared is up to no good, he would never have gotten clearance if there was so much bad stuff there. Maybe I was wrong.
I think you might have been, Stephanie. We all were wrong, because what we reported, Stephanie, was that 2 White House security officials reviewed Jared Kushner's application for a top secret clearance and recommended against granting it, but they were overruled by their supervisor, the man who was running the White House security office. And what the Times and the Post reporting says is he did that essentially at the direction of the president, on down through the chief of staff and the White House counsel. They made that happen and granted Kushner a top secret clearance. But what we also reported was that when his application went up to the CIA for what's known as SCI, sensitive compartmented information, some call it a higher level of clearance, the CIA also flagged questions in his background. And this is about, we reported the questions have to do with his family business, his foreign contacts, his foreign travel, and meetings he had during the campaign. Let's not forget that the Washington Post reported that there were intelligence reports suggesting that 4 separate foreign governments were discussing how to influence Jared Kushner through financial means. And these are the kind of things that raise concerns about giving someone access to classified information. So to this day, Stephanie, he does not have that CIA SCI, sensitive compartmented information clearance, which means he cannot see National Security Agency intercepts and CIA source reporting unless the president is giving it to him anyway, despite his lack of that clearance. This whole thing, though, raises questions about, look, Trump absolutely had the right to do this. But why did he have to lie about it, and why did Ivanka Trump lie? The Post is reporting that Ivanka Trump and Jared pressured their father to do this. So they were aware, according to the Washington Post, that their father intervened and gave them special treatment, contrary to what Ivanka said in that interview.
Why lie? That's the question of the morning. Malcolm, this is not about nepotism. This is not about why do they work at the White House anyway. This is about national security. When someone who gets their application flagged goes on to get this level of clearance, talk about the risk.
Well, the risk is immense. I mean, I held a top secret SCI clearance for a quarter of a century, plus special access programs, which he would need in order to do these jobs that he was doing. But he was flagged well before they came into the White House. You recall that there was a secret report that was issued that Jared Kushner had gone to the Russians and had asked them for secret cryptologic communications in order to have a back channel behind NSA and CIA. That is the first thing that we would flag you for, because it means that you may be under the sway or in communications with a foreign power against the best interests of the United States. So they flag your clearance right off the bat. The president is the ultimate central adjudicating authority for security clearances in the White House, but he still usually goes on the recommendation of the two adjudicators who work under him, plus their supervisor. The CIA, FBI, NSA have their own processes in which they determine whether you can see their information or not. Jared Kushner proved himself right off the bat as a security threat. Not just because of that, his financial dealings, whatever it was so bad, the U.S. intelligence community didn't want him to have their information.
Then, Rick, you got to answer the why lie. The president easily could have said, this is my boy. We know that Jared is his advisor on a variety of things, really his closest confidant. And the president could have said that, and could have said pound salt, but he didn't.
The reason you lie about it is because there's something else going on. The president has the ability to give Jared Kushner any security clearance he wants. He knows that. He said he didn't know that. Ivanka lied about it directly. So the whole thing is a con job.
Pourquoi?
And the con job is Jared Kushner is not out securing peace in the Middle East or securing peace with Saudi Arabia. He's out to secure contracts for a post-presidential business, whatever it is, both for him, for Ivanka, for himself, for his family, and for Donald Trump. That's what he's out there doing. That's because there's no other explanation for it. Because he would say, you know, American people, the reason Jared Kushner needs a security clearance is because he has all this foreign policy experience. I value his advice, but he didn't have that resume. He is good at one thing, securing business financing contracts. That's probably what he's doing.
He's good at securing business contracts when on the other side he can offer U.S. government leniency. So we have to remember that. So yes,
business.
So
this is
President Trump
these are what grifters do.
Ran a business that was bankrupted over 4 times. 666 Fifth Avenue, the Kushners building, was in peril, was in financial straits. So we have to remember, when we say he's great at securing financial deals, he's got something big to offer on the other side. Jason, John Kelly and Don McGahn didn't just push back, and we always have to remember, John Kelly was on the other side of the house. In terms of palace intrigue, he and Jared Kushner were not friends.
Right.
So it's no surprise that he would not want to help Jared. But for John Kelly and Don McGahn to go so far to write internal memos, mark this day, I don't support this, what does that mean?
It makes me think of James Comey. And you remember Comey was like, every time I met with the president, he's like, I think we all probably remember.
Yes,
but he's like, look, let me write this down because I know this is going to be bad one day. Because when history goes back and talks about what this led to, I want to make sure I'm on the record as being one of the people that said it wasn't a good idea.
No.
Essentially, it's not just the Russian context. It's not just trying to secure his own businesses. But wasn't he connected to like passports or something else like that with China and possibly selling those? I mean, he is basically selling our secrets for his own business, not just for future businesses, but even things that they're doing now. And the issue is, I can't imagine how problematic it is.
But we don't know. We don't know that for sure.
We do not know that for sure. But what else is he doing? I mean, like, it's very clear that he wasn't actively involved in the Middle East peace process. It's very clear that he wasn't actively involved in finding out what happened to Khashoggi. It's very clear that he's not necessarily doing Khashoggi. Thank you. It's very clear that he's not necessarily doing much in China. So what else could he be doing other than selling favor? And that's one of the problems. And what you've got is a guy who basically can't get through TSA pre-check, but you give him a pilot's license. And that's what he's doing right now.
All right, well, there is only one person at this table who can actually do anything about this, and it's you, Congressman. We know the House Oversight Committee has already launched an investigation into this, but what can actually be done? I mean, nepotism is not a crime.
Well, I think this is exactly why we have oversight committees, so you can bring people in who were involved, you were talking about, in the decision-making process. How did this happen? Who made the decisions? When were the decisions made? What did the NSA say? What did the CIA say? And I think those are the fact gatherings that need to happen, and then we can actually draw the conclusions we need to do. There's going to be plenty of things swirling around and a lot of guesses, and I think our job is to get to the bottom of it, and that's exactly what Chairman Schiff has said he's going to do. We have other oversight bodies, and I think that's the next step here.
Okay, Ken, this sticks out to me. You personally reported that this is not the only time that somebody got top secret clearance despite being flagged as unfavorable. Are you ready for this? Didn't happen once. It didn't happen twice. It happened 30 times. 30. Do we know anything about the other 29? And because I have no expertise in this, how common is that? To me, 30 sounds huge.
Stephanie, our sources told Laura Strickler and I that it's without precedent. It never happened in the Obama administration.
Ken, when you say unprecedented on this show, you got to pay me $2.
I said without precedent.
Yeah, well, you know what? We're going to go with $1 today. Yeah,
okay,
without
fair
precedent,
enough.
yes.
It didn't happen in the Obama administration or the George W. Bush administration, according to our sources who are familiar with this process. We don't know the identities of these people, but we know that many of them had some of the same issues, foreign business entanglements. Let's not forget, these were people with unusual backgrounds who came to work in the Trump administration. Many of them had not had clearances before, had not been in government. So you would expect that that would pose, some delay. What you would not expect is that the process would be overridden. And the question now is, did the White House or the president get involved in any other cases where the clearance process was disregarded, essentially?
Malcolm, last year the Washington Post reported that China, the UAE, Israel, and Mexico had all been overheard discussing ways that they could manipulate, specifically Jared Kushner himself. Help us understand how that would happen.
Oh, it's very simple. They understand that the United States government is now open and for sale. And by doing that, they now will figure out the pathways to get to their influence into the White House. And if that means that you have to help, you're the Qataris, right? And you suddenly realize that Jared Kushner is in debt at 666, Fifth Avenue, and you decide to buy all of that debt in order to gain leverage against Saudi Arabia because he's in Riyadh every week. They know how to play that game. The rest of the world plays this game. The United States up until this point had never been buyable. No president or their staff had ever been in a position where their knowledge and information was for sale. Like, for example, when Mohammed bin Salman got an enemies list from Jared Kushner that he claims came from U.S. intelligence. He was bragging about it and then shook down princes in his own country for almost $1 trillion of withheld money. That is abuse of the intelligence process and abuse of intelligence material. But it also tells our enemies that this guy will use the most secret information on the planet in order to advance their interests if you give him enough money, time, and influence.
Congressman, I obviously don't want you to name names, but you actually spend a lot of time with your fellow Republicans. It is very clear that the president and his family have an extraordinary amount of influence over this administration and this country. What are your peers on the other side of the aisle telling you privately?
There are plenty of them who are very concerned, not just about this, of course, but about lots of factors going on. And I think they are, many of the people I speak to, of course, there are those who believe in a lot of the ideas coming out of the administration, but are concerned with the process of the administration and how things are done and why they're done. I think you do separate the two. We saw with just this week on the emergency powers, on our vote earlier this week, big concern of, there's a separation of power here. We have a deep responsibility, and my Republican colleagues tell me the same thing. We in the House have to have strong oversight, even when it's not great for their party.
But Mike Pence could deliver them the policies that they're looking for, and the conduct we're talking about has nothing to do with the Republican Party. Most of them didn't know Donald Trump 3 years ago. Why did they stand by him when we hear things over and over like this?
Well, I can't really speak for that, but I'll tell you this: there's plenty of substance we can agree on, and there's plenty of substance we're going to disagree on. But I think there is an increasing concern, and not on TV, but behind the scenes, from a lot of my colleagues in the Republican Party about why were things done certain ways? How were they done? Let's get to the bottom of this. We want to get the facts. And I think that's, that's our job now, to get the facts out there, not just guess on what happened, but to actually find out what happened.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Coming up, is Michael Cohen